Okay. So good morning, everybody. We are going to do school elections today, school elections 2023. So if you are not in the right spot, I suppose this would be the time to stick around and enjoy some fun, even though you may not be in the right spot. My name is Nicole Thuat. I am the AIM unit manager now here at OPI. So I am no longer in school finance, but I am still helping out with elections, at least through this year's election cycle. So you're stuck with me for a little bit longer.
Thank you, Nicole, for doing this. By the way, we really appreciate you helping us out with this. This is awesome. I will be monitoring the chat. So if you don't want to shout out if you have a question, I will periodically pop in to let folks know of chat questions as well.
I appreciate that. And we'll get to your introduction here in a second, Shelley. But before we do that, I've got school finance staff contacts. So Andrea, if you want to pop on and say hello. Andrea, budget analyst in school finance. She's going to be shadowing me a lot for these election questions and seminars and things that we're going to be doing through this election cycle. So her contact information is there as well. And then we have Barb Quinn, our finance manager. Barb, do you want to say hello?
Hello, everyone. We really appreciate that Nicole is helping us out with the elections. Andrea and I are going to be, watching her with the elections and helping out with this. And thank you to MASBO for advertising all of this and putting it out there and helping with this Zoom. Great to see you all today.
All right. And then we have our MASBO staff contacts. So Shelley, I'm not sure how many staff you have on the call here, but I'll let you introduce yourself and everybody else.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shelley Turner, the executive director with MASBO. I know Marie is on the call as well. I don't know. I think Steve may be on the road today. He has been very busy helping schools across the state. And thank you also to everybody else at OPI that's also helping out with this. It's so great to see everybody, and it's good to have a good collaboration.
All right, thank you. And I do apologize that these are not in person this year, but with some staff shortages and travel limitations and the weather being a little bit chilly and not so great this week, I think this is going to work out for the best. So thank you, everybody, for being here today. The first ask I have of everyone today, if you could change your Zoom name. I know that Shelley left some information in the chat about how to do that. If you click the 3 little dots next to your name and select rename, change your name to your first name and the district, or if you're not with the district, the county, or some other way to designate exactly who you are so that we kind of have an idea of who we're talking to when we ask questions. That would be much appreciated. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I am going to launch a poll question here. We're going to have a few of these throughout. If you could go ahead and answer this question, tell us what you are. Give everybody a couple of minutes so that we can kind of see who we've got on the call today. All right, so it looks like we've got pretty much everybody entered here. So it looks like we have 80% are district clerks. We have 3 county superintendents with us. We have 2 other district staff members. Grab the right mouse here. It looks like we have 2 county election administrators. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate that. And then 1 other election staff. So thank you to everybody. It's good to see how many different people we have on our call today. All right. Let's get this thing going here. All right, so this is kind of our plan. Going forward today, we're going to do an overview of school elections, just a brief introduction, what school elections are. We'll walk through the election calendar, talking about some of our deadlines and our due dates and why those things are important. We will walk through some of the steps of conducting an election. We'll talk about the accessibility issues and review how things went with the changes that were implemented last year. And then we're going to look at some of the recent court and legislative issues. We have, of course, a legislative session coming up in January. So we're going to talk about how you can kind of track some of the things that are going on and how we're going to keep you apprised of changes that may be taking place. I encourage everyone to please ask questions. We love to have your questions because that's kind of how we drive our trainings. So you can use either the raise hand feature. So one of the options that you have is reactions, and you can use that to raise your hand, or you can put your questions in the chat. We're happy to take either live questions or chat questions. If there are questions we may be addressing later in the presentation, we may put your question in a parking lot and then come back to it later in the presentation. All right, so another couple of things, housekeeping issues, of course, everybody please stay muted unless you are speaking, just to eliminate some background noise. If you need anything at any time, please do not hesitate to interrupt us or raise your hand or ask questions. We will take a break about somewhere in the middle of this morning, and then we will also break for lunch sometime around noon. We'll have about an hour break for lunch, and then we'll come back in the afternoon and finish up the presentation. So I'm not entirely sure how long we'll go. We could go earlier than 3. We could be done after 3, but we'll try to keep everything within the allotted time as much as possible. But we want to make sure that you have plenty of time to get your questions answered and anything else that you may have. All right, so school district election overview. So what do we do? Why do we have school district elections? So we have school district elections because first and foremost, we need to elect our board of trustees. That's kind of the most important reason. We have that election every year. And then everything else would be optional. The optional general fund levy that you could run every year, school bonds, budgeted fund levies, including technology and building reserve. And then there are some other elections that we could have as well. So one that's come up would be a county high school unification. If you were going to buy some land that was not adjacent to your school, if you were going to do a district consolidation or annexation, other than abandoning and attaching. Those are some of the things that you could have elections for. All right, so next poll question. Let's see if I can figure out how to get to the next poll question. Oh, let's see if it's letting me. Launch this next question. This is still not letting me do that. Let's see. All right, so
You want me to try, Nicole?
you can try. I'm not sure it's going to let you either. I think it's just a matter of how I put them in here.
Wait a minute. Did it do it?
I
Yes,
can see the whole question.
yes, okay, great. So prior year elections. So which of these elections have you run in the past year? And notice there's a distinction between the trustee by election and the trustee by acclamation. And if you are not someone that would have run an election, you don't have to worry about answering, or you can just choose did not run an election. All right, looks like we've got everybody, so I'll click that. And share results. So it looks like we had more trustee elections than by acclamation, at least for this group. So that's kind of an interesting trend. Several of you ran general fund levies. We had one bond levy. 10 of you ran other budgeted fund levies. So kind of a variety of elections that districts are running. All right. So we're going to look at MCA quite a bit throughout this presentation. And one of the reasons that I want you to look at the MCA rather than just saying, well, Nicole said, I want you to see that there actually is Montana code. There's a law backing up everything that we're giving you. So a school election, according to MCA 20-1-101, is a regular school election or any other election conducted by a district or community college for authorizing taxation, the issuance of bonds, accepting or rejecting any proposition in accordance with the provisions of this title. So that's what a school election is. All right, so I want to make a distinction between the two types of levies that your school district may have. I get quite a few of these questions as we go through the year. So we have voted levies, which are the ones that you have to put on your ballot. They have to have voter approval. They are limited in duration and they are for a specific purpose. So these may be multiple year levies. They do not have to just be single year. Whereas in contrast, your permissive levies are annual levies. They're approved as part of your budget. And they also have a very specific purpose as outlined in statute. And I believe Heather had a question. Shelley, do you want to?
Yep, I just was about ready to respond back. So yes, that's why this is being recorded today. We're working in conjunction to be able to post this on the OPI website, as well as have the link to the OPI website on the MASBO website once the video is prepared for everyone. And then I will load the slides as well onto the MASBO website.
And the slides will be available on the OPI site as well. So yes, yep. Both the slides and the recording will be available. All right, so some of the school district levies that are permissive are tuition, transportation, building reserve has both a voted and a permissive piece to it. There are adult education levies, and notice that's in two different spots. So one has to do with adult education and one has to do with advanced opportunities. There is a flexibility fund levy that has to do with transformational learning, bus depreciation. Remember too, that if you're going to do any of these permissive levies, you have to run the resolution of intent to increase your non-voted levy. and you have to prepare that not later than March 31st. And I know MASBO will be doing some additional budget trainings and providing some additional information about this notice and helping you get the language correct and getting these notices out as well. So just be looking for that as we get toward March. Make sure that you do this, because if you don't run this notice, then you will not be able to run these levies when it comes to your budget in August. It's especially important as we now have the tuition fund, where you are responsible for a portion of the cost of students in foster and group homes that are enrolled in another district, and for students who are in residential treatment facilities. You're going to want to pay attention to getting this resolution of intent done in case you have any of those expenses, and you're going to want to pay them from the tuition fund. All right, so back to school district elections. What's the timing? When do we run school district elections? So school district elections are the first Tuesday after the first Monday in May. I thought it was kind of funny that first Tuesday after the first Monday, that's kind of the language in all of election law. Just kind of a funny side story. Our calendars here at OPI had the 1st of November flagged as election day because that's the first Tuesday. But the 1st was not election day. It was actually the 8th because it's the first Tuesday after the first Monday. So just a little side story there. The only exception would be in years when the legislature meets in regular or special session that affects school funding. In that case, you can move general fund levy only, not the trustee election, to a later date. So you always have to hold that trustee election on the first Monday in May. And then that general fund levy has to be on that same day unless it's a legislative year. Any other election that you want to hold, you can hold that election on any other day at the discretion of the Board of Trustees. Please note that if you do hold an election on another day, you have to meet all of the school election timelines. So that would be starting with calling the election 70 days before. We'll talk more about that. Any elections that will affect your school budget have to be held before August 1st. So if you're going to postpone that general fund levy this year because it's a legislative year, you want to make sure that you schedule that so that your election is all cleaned up and all wrapped up in time for you to set your budget in August. So here are those MCAs. I told you I was going to point out a few of these for you. This is the one that says the first Tuesday after the first Monday in May. And also here in the same statute, it says that when the legislature meets and affects school funding, which pretty much anytime they meet, they affect school funding, you can have that general fund levy election on a different day than regular school election day. And then here's the MCA that says that if you're going to have a levy for your budget, you have to have that election to authorize that financing before August 1st of the school fiscal year for which it is effective. So that's your deadline for holding that election. All right, so we've talked a little bit already about Montana Code annotated. Montana Code is what governs school elections. The primary section of MCA that governs elections is Title 13. There are some additional election MCAs in Title 20. And in cases where Title 13 and Title 20 conflict, Title 20 is what takes precedence. So Title 20 is the school portion. Title 13 is general election law. So, and we'll talk about some of the places where Title 13 and Title 20 conflict as we go through the presentation today. All right, so again, here's the MCA. Should there be a conflict between Title 13 and this title, which is 20, the Title 20 shall govern. So who then is responsible for school district elections? First and foremost, the Board of Trustees are primarily responsible. The first thing that they're going to do is they're going to appoint a clerk of the district. That clerk is the election administrator unless the county election office agrees to conduct your election on your behalf. In a case where the county election conducts the school election, they're required to perform the duties in Title 20. And then they return all of your election results to the school district for the canvass. So basically, they're going to conduct the election, give you all the paperwork and say, here you go. And the school is responsible for the rest. In the cases where the county does run the election for the school districts are required to pay those election costs. Andrea, do you want to try to launch the next poll question for me? Perfect. All right. So if you could tell us, here's some options for who is running your school district election. All right, looks like everybody's answered. Oh, we got one more, sorry. All right, so interestingly, 43% are running your own elections by your choice. 28% the county has refused or has said that they don't want to run your elections for you. 9%, 5 say that the county runs some, but not all. And 20%, almost 20%, 10 of you, the county runs them. So good, we have a good mix of county and district elections. All right, so again, here are some MCAs. So I just want you to see that there is some backing to this. The school district trustees are responsible for appointing a clerk. And in Title 13, it says, except for school elections that are not administered by the county, the election administrator is the school district clerk. And we'll talk a little bit more, but the school district clerk is responsible for everything except for voter registration. And here's the other MCA regarding the request for the county to conduct the election. We'll talk more about this in timelines, but it does say that the school district can request that the county do that. Of course, the county is not obligated to do it. It's simply a request. Okay, so one of the things that is a major driver with school district elections, specifically the trustees, is the type of school district that you have. So of course, then we have 4 different types of school districts in regards to elections. We have elementary, we have high school, we have K-12, and we have county high schools. And so this is where it gets a little bit confusing, is that really trustees are elected as either elementary trustees or as county high school trustees. So high schools themselves really do not have trustees. And we'll talk a little bit more about this. There are additional representatives that get to vote on high school issues, but those are elected from other elementaries. So it is elementaries that actually represent high schools. Okay, so the first thing that we do is in determining trustee issues or how many trustees that a district has, the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at district population. So you are either a first class, a second class, or a third class district based on the people population within the boundaries of your school district. So if you have a people population greater than 6,500, you're first class. Between 1,000 and 6,499, your second class, and third class is a population less than 1,000. And we do have some counties, interestingly enough, that have large student populations who are first, second, or third class. And then we have some first class districts that have some pretty small student populations, but because of the people population that's greater than 6,500, they become first class districts. So there's a wide variety of district sizes within each of these because they're not based on student population, but actually based on people population. All right, so then the number of trustee positions that you have in your district is then driven by that district classification. So you may have, if you're first class, you're required to have 7 trustees. You have no variation. That's simply what you have. If you are a second class district, you may have 3 or you have 5 trustees, but you can increase that to 7 if you wish. In a third class district, you're required to have 3 trustees, but you may increase that to 5. And again, I know, we have some districts where, finding a number of trustees can be difficult because of the population or the type of population that's within that district. Some of these third class districts may have 5 trustees because, there's so many people that might be related to each other, or they're trying to get a little better representation on their boards. So. And again, here's the MCAs that outline the number of trustee positions that you have in each of those districts. For the second and third class districts, it also lines out what you have to do to either increase or decrease the number of trustee positions that you have. So you can go up by simply taking action as the Board of Trustees. If you want to go down, that requires a petition from the qualified electors that are within your school district. Okay, so again, high school trustees, there are no high school trustees per se. High school trustees are basically elementary representatives. So the elementary where the high school is located, if the elementary and high school are unified, the elementary trustees represent both the elementary and the high school. You have some situations where you have outlying elementary districts that feed into a high school. In that case, those elementary trustees where that high school is located are going to represent both the located elementary and the outlying elementaries, unless those additional or those outlying elementaries petition the county superintendent for additional representation on the high school board. So again, here's that MCA. The trustees of a high school district are the trustees of the elementary district where the high school building is located. And you could have additional trustee positions should they follow the MCA to request those additional positions. So how do you how do you get additional high school representatives on a school board? What you have to do is there's an MCA for that, of course, and it goes through the exact process. I've kind of broken the calculation down into a little bit of a simplification here. So basically, you're going to get a taxable value per trustee by taking the taxable value of the elementary and dividing it by the number of elementary trustees. So if you had 70,000 in taxable value and you had 7 trustees, it's going to be 10,000 per trustee. And then you're going to take the total high school taxable value and subtract out the elementary. So that's going to be your unrepresented portion of taxable value. And we do have some circumstances where there's a lot of taxable value outside of the located elementary, and some where there's very little outside of the located elementary. But what you do there is you compare that taxable value, and then you're going to get a ratio of unrepresented taxable value, and you're going to round to the nearest whole number. So if the number is greater than 0.5, you get a number of voting positions to be assigned to the outlying elementary districts. The maximum number you can get is 4 in a first or second class district and 2 in a third class district. It's kind of interesting because that number is the number of positions that you get. We do have one school district out in Sanders County, interestingly, that has a lot of taxable value outside the located elementary. So they qualify as a second class district for 4 outlying trustee positions. And they have a really hard time filling those because even though there's a lot of taxable value outside of that elementary district, there aren't a lot of people outside of that, and there aren't a lot of people that want to serve on school boards. So it can get kind of interesting when you request those outlying representatives. It's also a maximum of 2 in a third class district. And then if it comes out that it is less than 0.5, so there's not a lot of taxable value outside of the elementary, then what happens is they get offered a non-voting position on that board of trustees. So they still get to give some input on what that outlying elementary needs, but they don't have a voice or they don't have a vote on that school board. So again, here's the whole MCA that kind of walks through that whole calculation. If you're interested in taking a look at that, you can run some of those calculations. Here's the request and determination, how they figure out how many trustees and whether they're a voting or a non-voting position. All right, so let's talk about K-12 districts. So K-12 districts are the easy ones. So those of you that are K-12 districts, clap, because you don't have to worry about additional outlying representatives because your elementary and high school boundaries are contiguous. And there is no additional representation in a K-12 district. County high schools are a little bit of a different animal. So county high schools follow the classification of the elementary where the high school is located. So they get determined whether they are first, second, or third class by that elementary. But the number of trustees in a county high school is always, sorry about that. The number of trustees in a county high school is always 7. No matter if they're first, second, or third class. They have 7 trustees, 4 of which are elected from the elementary where the high school is located. And 3 of those positions are elected from the outlying areas. All right, Andrea, do you want to launch for me a poll question? Whoops. I'm going the wrong direction here. All right, so there's 3 questions here, so we'll go through these. So which type of school district are you first? Are you elementary located, elementary independent, high school joint with an elementary, a county high school, or a K-12? And some of you might be more than one because you might be Helena Elementary and Helena High School. I didn't give you the option to choose 2, so I apologize. All right, so it looks like we have a 1 county high school. I like to see that split. It looks like we got about a third, a third, a third that are elementary joint, elementary independent, and K-12. Okay, can you do the second question, Andrea? There we go.
Yeah. Hold on. Whoops. It just says 1 question.
Okay, go ahead and go to the next. So
Okay.
should be
The
under,
district information.
Yep.
Okay, there we go. Whoops, gotta launch it.
all right, go ahead.
I did.
I can see it.
Okay. So this one should have a series of questions. I'm not seeing it for some reason. There we go. Okay. So it's going to ask you what type of district you are, what's your district classification, and then how many trustees that you have. All right.
You want me to end it? Oh, there we go.
All right. So it looks like, let's see, we did that one. So scroll down here and see. So it looks like we have a pretty good division of first, second, and third class districts. We have 5 of you that said that you're unsure. So we'll show you where you can find that information here in a few minutes. And then it looks like we've got, interestingly, no second class with 7 and no additional representatives, but we have 1 that is second class with 7 plus additional high school representatives. And everything else looks like we have a little bit of everything. So very interesting. All right.
Okay, I'm gonna.
All right. So again, here's that membership of the county high schools. 4 positions where the where the elementaries, where the high school is located, and 3 in the territory outside. So how do things change, basically, is a good question. So managing change. District classification is the responsibility of the county superintendent. So the county superintendent takes a look at your district population and make sure that it's in line with the populations in your district. I think I'll pick on Jack because I know he's on here. He's probably getting tired of me bugging him. I've spent pretty much the bulk of the last 10 years bugging him about Summers, which went to first class a couple of years ago, Evergreen, which is going to first class this year. And then it looks like Big Fork is going to be the next one that will go to first class there. So those are some of the classification changes that we've had. We don't typically have a lot of these. I think the only other one that I can think of would be Dillon, and Beaverhead County High School went to first class a few years back. For the most part, this is pretty stable. We do have a few that are kind of on that up and down border at the top range of their classification.
Yeah, Big Fork was only 28 over this year, and it was the first time they were over. So I kind of hedged on moving them up this year, and we'll see if that remains the same or grows. It'll probably grow, so it'll have to be moved up in the next year or two.
Right. And we'll talk about why some of that classification change is important, because there are some other things attached to classification other than just the number. So okay, so here's that MCA again that says that the county superintendent is the one that makes that decision. They can change that classification only once every 5 years. So that's kind of, why Jack likes to monitor it for a couple of years before he changes it, because it can only be changed once. So if it was a fluke that it was 28 over this year and next year it shows up as 100 under, well, then you've made a change and maybe you shouldn't have. So that prudence is probably a very good thing. So this is if you do make a change to the number of trustee positions, this is kind of how you do it. This talks specifically about eliminating them, but that's how you would manage that. Additional high school trustee positions. Once you go through the process of adding those high school positions, the number of those positions does not change unless there would be a substantial change in the taxable value of either the elementary or the high school, or if you had a change in the elementary district classification. And again, here's that MCA that says you're going to redetermine the number of positions, and should that number change or should something else change, the county superintendent gets to reestablish the trustee nominating districts. We haven't talked about that yet. We'll get to that. All right, so how do we know how big your district population is? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look. Everybody can see the screen here. So this is the US Census Bureau, and they keep population estimates for school districts. Now, in 2020, that was a year in which you had an actual census taken. So you would scroll down here and you can look at estimates by state. And we can go to Montana. And here are those population estimates. Now it tells you on the screen what those titles are. If I go back. So here's the file layout, so you can see what those look like at the top. But basically what it is these are your population numbers. So Belgrade High School District has a population of 26,139. We were talking about Big Fork. So Big Fork Elementary is what we're looking at. And they are at 6528. So they're 28 above that number. So pretty much all of them are in here. So you could take a look at that. That's where we get the information that populates that district classification report that I'll show you in a few minutes. That's on the OPI website. All right. So of course, there'll be a link to that site. So if you're curious about that, that link will be available on this presentation. So you'll be able to go back and take a look, and you can play around in that site and look at some of the information that's on that US Census site as well. All right, so switching gears a little bit here, how long do trustees serve for? So the usual term for a trustee position is 3 years. There are some changes to that, of course, when you have an appointment for a vacancy. So vacancies, in the case of an appointment, they would serve until the next election. And then they are elected for the remainder of the term. So that's one of the exceptions. The other exception is, and this happens sometimes in some of our smallest school districts where it's a little more difficult to get a trustee, is you may have a situation where you have a trustee that no longer wants to serve. You have one that has resigned. So now you have 2 vacancies out of 3 trustee positions. You don't have a quorum. You can't hold a board meeting. You don't have anybody to file for these. You don't know who's going to serve. That person that has decided they're not going to continue on the board may continue to act as a trustee beyond that 3-year period, because the law says that the term is 3 years or until a successor is elected or appointed. So that is one of the circumstances in which you can have a trustee serving a little bit longer. I see there's a chat question about filling vacancies.
Yeah, we have, when you say appointment to fill a vacancy is then elected for the remainder of the term, do they go on the ballot? So if they'd want to continue once that term is up, then yes, they would go on the ballot, right, Nicole?
That's correct. And yes, so if you had somebody resign, say now, they would serve until the next election, which is in May. And then what they would have to do is, say there were 2 years left on that term, you're going to have a 3-year position and a 2-year position on the ballot. And that person that's been appointed then would have the option to file a declaration of intent for either the 3-year or the 2-year position. But yes, they would have to be elected in order to serve the remainder of that term. All right. So again, here's that MCA. So it says that they serve for 3 years unless it says otherwise somewhere. Okay, and then that appointment and filling vacancies is where we get off a little bit on our staggered terms. So the law says that it's the intent that we're electing a majority, not electing a majority of 3-year positions at any one election. So a 7 trustee board should be electing 2 in the first year, 2 in the second year, 3 in the third year, or some other combination. It might be 3, 2, 2, but there should be a 2, and a 3. You should never be electing 4. If you have 5 trustees, it should be a 1, 2, 2. You should be never electing 3 in a single year. And then if you have 3 trustees, it should be 1, 1, 1. Now, of course, there's going to be times when you are electing, for example, on a 7 trustee board, you might be electing 4 people because you have 3 3-year terms and 1 2-year term. And that's okay. It's just the 3-year terms should fit the stagger.
So, and when, like I moved Evergreen up this year. So
Correct.
the 2 new positions, one's going to be 3 and one's going to be 2. Is that correct?
Right. And what'll happen is we'll have to talk a little bit about that, because what the MCA says, and I'm not sure I have it included in here, is that when you increase the number of positions, you're going to draw by lot who gets what. So you're going to have a 2-year and a 3-year. So on your ballot, it's going to look a little different. It will say trustee position, term to be determined, or new trustee position, term to be determined, elect two. And then at that organizational meeting or at the canvas, you're going to draw lots to see who's going to get which position. All right, so this is something that I highly recommend. And I actually had, a school district help me with this, is to keep a spreadsheet so that you have trustee positions rather than trustee people, so that you can keep track, especially if you have a situation where you have a number of people that have resigned and you're filling positions. That way you have an idea of which positions are up for election. And then it becomes a matter of position rather than a matter of people. And I'll kind of give you an example here on the next one. So here in this example, the third trustee position, the person resigned and Robert Frost was appointed in November. And what do we do with this? So this position is technically not up until 2025. Robert is going to serve until the election in 2023. So in this election for 3 trustees, you're going to have a 3-year position that was previously held by Edgar Allan Poe, and you're going to have a 2-year position to fill the remainder of the term that Robert Frost was appointed to. And this will kind of help you keep track of, what are 3-year positions, what are 2-year positions, and then how long are those positions for when you do your appointments.
So when I do my certificates for an appointed trustee, I actually put the year that the term should end on there. So that's helpful for the clerks, I think.
That's really good advice. Yes, definitely. Because then, if, Jack, suddenly you decide you don't want to be superintendent anymore, and, we turn over 3 or 4 superintendents and 2 or 3 district clerks, and then somebody goes back and goes, oh, wow, our stagger is off. Well, let's look back historically and see where we got off. You've got that information on filed documents. So that's a really good suggestion, is to put it on that certificate of appointment. So
Nicole, there's a question. Is this form that you just showed available on the OPI site?
it's not, but I can certainly post it there if you would like me to.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, I will make that available and give that out, and I'll send it to you as well, Shelley. So if you want to post it on your site, you can too.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep. So, yeah, we've had a few of these where, we've had change or turnover, and then all of a sudden somebody's like, oh, wait, this isn't right. We've kind of had to go back and kind of unravel all their elections and their appointments and get things back on the right foot. So this would be a good way to keep track of that. All right, so then you have to factor, of course, in the additional high school positions. So you could definitely add those to the spreadsheet. You want to make sure that your stagger still works with that. So you don't, if you have 4 outlying trustees and 7 elementary trustees, you've got to make sure that that stagger works so that you're not electing, 5 in 1 year, for example. So same with third class when you're putting in that maximum of 2. And then in the county high schools, you want to make sure that that stagger works as well. So your outlying elementary, where you have that 3 trustees, should be a 1-1-1. And within the elementary district, it should be a 1-1-2. So. All right, so we've thrown a lot of information at you here. So what are some of the resources that you have available to you to assist you with school elections? So here's kind of a list of those, and we'll kind of go through each of those and take a look a little more closely at these. First and foremost, you have the wisdom of your county superintendents. Those county superintendents are responsible for your district classification. So they're keeping track of your district populations, the number of trustees that you have. They're making determinations about your additional high school representatives. We didn't talk about this yet, but I'll talk about establishing nominating districts. So we do have some situations where we have single member elementaries. Those are, Wolf Point, Hardin, and Billings that I know of right now. Or if you have additional high school representatives or a county high school, those nominating districts are where those additional representatives are elected from. And in some cases, it's really easy. So for example, in Helena, we have 2 outlying districts, Trinity Elementary and Wolf Creek Elementary. And there's only 1 additional high school representative that they're entitled to. So the nominating district would be Wolf Point Elementary and Trinity Elementary that elect that trustee. In some other places, it's not so simple. So I believe Billings has 2 outlying representatives on their high school board, but there are like 5 or 6 outlying elementaries. So how do you determine who gets to elect those additional representatives? That is completely up to the county superintendent to make that determination. Jack, do you guys have outlying representatives for, I hate to put you on the spot, but I know you're on there. Outlying reps for Kalispell, for Flathead High School?
Yes, and they're kind of divided into districts, because we have 15, no, let's see, what do they have?
A lot.
Yeah, and so they're divided into 4 different groupings, and there's 1 represented from there. So there's 4 high school representatives in there. I don't know how it was originally divided into those groups, but they represent 2 or 3 of the elementary districts outlying each.
No. Yeah, and some of those things, they might be divided based on, the population. So if you had, 10,000 people, I guess, population outside of the high school, you might say that, all right, we're going to take, and divide by 4 and match up the ones that, make up 2,500 or whatever. So, there's different ways that you can do it, but it's up to the counties to do that. They can change those nominating districts if things significantly change. So it might be that, originally, when the nominating districts were done, that there were only, 5 outlying districts. And now because of abandonment and attachment, there's only 2. So that might change things. Or you might have an increase in population in some of those outlying districts. So that's up to your county superintendent. And if you have any questions about your nominating districts or why they're a certain way, definitely go and chat with your county superintendent about that. The county superintendent also is responsible for administering the oath to trustees, or they can designate another person to do that. Typically, they would attend the organizational meetings or the canvas, or both if they're together, and do that swearing in cases where, again, I'll pick on you, Jack, where you have a lot of outlying districts. It might not be possible to be at all of them. So you might have a designee or, some other person.
I've actually attended 5 board meetings in one night before.
Wow. That's pretty impressive, I will
I
say.
get a tour of the county every spring.
Weather permitting, I'm sure. All right. And then the other thing that I've asked county superintendents to do, sometimes because they're in the same office with county election staff, is when there's a little bit of a contentious relationship sometimes between school districts and county election offices, that county superintendent is really good to step in and kind of, help smooth things over and kind of assist with the communication. Usually it's a communication issue between school districts and counties. So I appreciate the work that they do in that regard as well. All right, so our county election folks, we've a couple of them on the call with us today. They are responsible for implementing the provisions of Title 13. Their duties are outlined in Title 13, Chapter 1, Part 3. They are primarily, first and foremost, responsible for the registration of voters in the county. So the school districts do not have anything to do with voter registration, with one small exception. But pretty much county election administrators are responsible for everything regarding voter registration. So they're going to give you voter registration lists. They're going to do the notice of close of regular registration, and they're going to handle all the registrations for late registration. They also maintain that now permanent absentee voter list. So they'll let you know who those folks are as well. The other thing that they do that is very helpful for school districts is that they hire and train election judges for elections run by the county. So often you can call upon them. If you're short for election judges for your school district, you can get lists from them. Usually they'll share their election judges with you. The counties may help you with your school district election. They may conduct your election for you, or they can provide you some level of assistance. So I know some counties say, we're not going to run your school district election for you, but we'll collect your absentee ballots or your mail ballots, or we'll do your signature verification for you, or, some level of assistance, even if they're not completely running the election.
And don't judges have to be registered voters in the district that they're judging?
That's correct. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through and talk about election judges. But yes, yeah. And that's where, the county, they did change the law so that any election judge in a county can be an election judge in any precinct. But they didn't change that for school districts. But they still might have a list at the county office that you can say, can you run me a list of any election judges you have that live in my school district? So. And then the newer thing that we have is the electronic voter machines. So the ES&S or the AutoMark or the other electronic voter system, they will provide that machine to districts, and they will assist districts with setting that up and getting that ready to use for a school district election. All right, so the next player in school district elections that are kind of behind the scenes, and everybody may chuckle that they're actually involved in school elections, because when you call them and the minute you say school elections, they transfer you directly to me, but they do still have a large role to play in school elections, is Secretary of State's office, and their duties are in Title 13, Chapter 1, Part 2. They are the chief election officer for the state. So their first and foremost primary function is to establish forms and rules that govern all elections in the state of Montana. So they're the ones that kind of streamline things and make things the same across the state. They advise and assist election administrators on the National Voter Registration Act. They provide training for county election administrators and their staff. If you have the opportunity to participate in any of the county election trainings, you can call your county election office and ask if you can, come to one of their trainings. That might be some good way to get some more information about the conduct of elections. They also might be able to provide you some of the resources that the Secretary of State's office shares with them. They also prepare and distribute training materials for election administrators and judges. I know that sometimes counties will run election judge trainings. And again, if you can nudge your way in and get into some of those county election trainings, that might be a really good way too, to get some additional background on elections and conduct of elections. Even though county elections might differ slightly from school elections, it's still really good information. And then finally there, the Secretary of State's office is responsible for all mail ballot election plans. They're the ones that do the approval. You have to send those in to them to get approved for a mail ballot election. So here is what their website looks like. And we'll go back to the website here and click off of this one. This gets us to the Secretary of State's website. So this one's really easy. It's just sosmt.gov. And they have this really great section here on elections. So you can go down here under election officials. And here's all your forms. So we'll take a look there. They have updated this, so this is really nice if you want to search for something. So if you just start typing in here, mail ballot plan, it just pulls it right up for you. You don't even have to go down here and look for it. But there are folders down here too. So if you're looking for mail ballot forms, all of the forms that relate to mail ballots are down here. So there's a new way to search, or you can go down and just look through the forms and see what's available in here. There
Nicole,
are some, yes, go ahead.
There's a chat.
Okay.
the question is, if the county does your mail elections, does the school still have to submit a application through the Secretary of State's office for mail ballot?
That's a great question. So I'm going to say that really depends on what your contract with the county says. So when you do a contract with the county to administer your school district election, you should really lay out who's going to do what. And that would be in regard to any of your deadlines on the school election calendar. So I have seen some circumstances where the county is going to run your election, but you are still responsible for publication of all the notices, for example. So make sure that it's spelled out exactly who's doing what in your contract with the counties. That way you can make sure that things like this don't get missed. Because what happens if you do not turn in this mail ballot plan, timetable, and instructions 60 days before the election?
You don't get to run a mail ballot election.
Exactly. Yep. So you want to make sure that you know whose responsibility it is to turn this plan in.
And they are very strict on their deadline. And even if we had one district one year submit it to an old email address they thought was still valid, it was in that inbox in a timely manner, but it didn't go to the correct email address. So they denied the application.
Yep. And I get at least one or two every year that for some reason it does not get to the secretary in time. And so they have to swap and run a full election. So it's very important that when you submit that, you make sure that you get some kind of notifications back that your plan has been accepted or received. And yes, you have to do an application for mail ballot every single year. So every single year, every single election. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. All right, so some of the other cool things on here, if you go under elections, election officials, there's a resources tab. A lot of this again pertains to county elections, but there is still some really good information about, you know, things like how do you reconcile ballots? What is a canvas? So some other, you know, just general election overview kind of information. There's an election judge handbook and training. So if, you know, the county can't give you 3 names of people in your district and you have to go out and find a judge, you have to give them this handbook and training because you have to do the same training that the Secretary of State's site would recommend. Here's presentation. So if you're, you know, looking to attract some election judges, maybe you might want to put this out on your school district website and say, hey, we need election judges for our upcoming election. You know, here's what it's like to be an election judge. And she might put something like that out there. Here's some directives and guidance. We'll talk more about this later. But this is all in regard to some of the things that have changed in school election or in elections in general.
Nicole, on that site,
Yes.
isn't there also a location for if you're doing a mail ballot, updated language for envelopes, those kind of things? Because I know some schools may not have had an election in the past and
Yep.
may need to update their materials that they need to order in advance. Sometimes you discover all of a sudden that you need things that you don't realize.
Right. So if you want to go out and check that you have the right language on your signature envelope with affirmation, you can just go out there and you can click on it, make sure that this language here matches what's on the envelopes that you have. Yes, all that stuff is available on that website as well.
Thanks for showing that.
Yes. All right, let's move that back up here.
Shay just asked, well, has the language changed recently that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, no. But just to double check, I would go out, you know, because sometimes you'll print, you know, enough envelopes and 10 years later, you're pulling some out of the back room and maybe it was a box that you forgot you had or something. So yeah, definitely check that. All right, the next tab is election official training, and it looks like they're doing some work on this. But here are some really good things here as well. So if you want to find out about the mail ballot process, you can click on this here. And it's got these really great trainings that you can kind of go through, and it talks about, you know, some of this might be old, but the information in here is still pretty much the same. This is all the requirements to run a mail ballot election. It's really good because it gives you all the MCAs and the information that you need there. Oops. Serving voters with disabilities, how to use the voting equipment. So if you're a little intimidated by that voting equipment, you might just go ahead and take a look at some of these. There's some information about hand counting if you're not using the, you know, electronic counting machines. If you want to find out about the UVA-CAVA voters, we'll talk a little bit more about them. So lots of good information here. Let's see, I think that's, and then there's the judge training. So again, if you have to train your own election judges, here's the presentation that you would want to use for that. I really like this polling place situation. So if you're doing a poll election, I would really recommend you print out this quick guide and have some of these available for your election judges. It's just a little kind of cheat sheet. So what do you do if kind of thing? I think it's really great. And even if you're not training your own election judges, I have had a few situations where I've gotten phone calls that, you know, well, I think this is what should be happening, but this is what the election judges are doing. So if you as an election administrator are familiar with how the election judges have been trained and what their handbooks say, I think that helps you to better answer some of those questions and kind of bridge the gap there. So I would recommend that you look through some of this stuff as you can. One of the other things that I really like on this page is this My Voter page. So if you go to this page and you have click start, So if you have somebody that comes into your office and says, hey, I really want to run for trustee, am I eligible to be a trustee in the school district? You can go in here and you can have them type in their name. You're all gonna know how old I am after I do this. I'm gonna do it really fast. And hit continue. It tells you that person's name. It gives you their residential address, tells you their Senate and their House district, their polling place, your precinct number, all of that information. So you can kind of see whether they're registered to vote. You can see exactly where they live. So that's one resource available to you. We'll talk more about the ArcGIS maps and where that puts you as far as school districts go. But at least here you can see you are registered to vote. So if you get one that says you are not registered to vote, you're going to want to make sure that you give them a voter registration card and have them fill it out before they leave your office or before they turn in a declaration of intent as a candidate. So. All right, so that's pretty much the Secretary of State site. They have some really great information there. I invite you to go check it out. It's really some good information. All right, so back to our screens. Okay, so next up is us, OPI. So what do we do for you? Our duties are outlined again in MCA 2020-102. Our responsibilities are to implement, and I'm going to use enforce loosely. Enforce just means we provide you information about the provisions of Title 20. We do not have any statutory authority to say you must do, or if you don't do, I'm going to. So we don't have that kind of authority. But we do have the authority to make rules to clarify Title 13 for school elections. We have the authority to create forms. One of the things that I really am happy about, or it's kind of a big accomplishment in the last 10 years, is the collaboration that we have with MASBO, the Montana School Board Association, the Secretary of State's office, our county election officials. We try to coordinate with all of those groups that are working in the school election field. And then we develop our forms and our manuals based on those things. So that's one of the things that I'm really kind of big on, is all that collaboration. How do we all make sure that we're saying the same thing? And then, of course, we'll provide you on technical assistance, so you can call us at any time with any questions about school elections. We're happy to do that for you. We'll develop documents for you, putting things out there like different types of forms or instructions or manuals or anything that you might need in order to better operate your school elections. We're happy to help you at any time. One of the other things that we do is we do collect school district classification data from the county election, or from county superintendents for use in school elections. I'll show you that in a minute. And we also work with the legislature to advocate for school elections. So when school election laws come up, or laws that affect school elections, we're up there, we're talking to the legislature, we're letting them know, hey, this is going to work, and hey, this is not going to work, and kind of advocating on your behalf. So that's one of the things that we do as well. All right, so some of the things on our site. All right, so here's the school, the OPI page. If you go under leadership, you can go directly to elections here. Or if you end up on the school finance page, if that's what you have bookmarked, you can go down here and there's also a link to elections here. So this is what the elections page looks like. There's all of these accordion files. We've got your ballot materials, your guides and information. These are links to the Secretary of State site that we were just on. And then also some trustee information. So if you look at the guides and information, we have our election handbook out here. So that's the updated one, the newest, latest and greatest version of our election handbook. We have the election calendar with forms. Again, this is a school district requested document. We'll talk more about it in a few minutes. It just has a direct link to any form you would need that is associated with an election calendar date. And then just the simple election calendar there. This is the district classification report. So county superintendents, we go in every year, we put in the district population based on the estimates that we showed you earlier. And we copy the information over that says, you know, how many trustees they have, the date of the last change that was made, so you can see that. This is Dillon and Beaverhead County that I mentioned. We changed that in 2014. And it tells you your classification. So it's got first class districts, it's got your county. And then you go down, there's your second class districts. Is there anybody that wants to speak up that didn't know their classification, that wants to find out what it is now? Feel free to unmute and tell me who you are. No volunteers? Okay. So,
Quiet
but
group
here's-
this morning.
I'm sorry?
I said it's a quiet group this morning. Nobody's had their coffee yet.
Yeah. We'll give you a break and grab coffee. I would. So Melissa, you're at Win It, correct? Let's see here. If I search for. There you are. So you are a district population of 500 does not seem right. I'm gonna have Andrea check that. Andrea, would you make a note to check that, please? You are in the second class group. So you are a second class district.
That was Win It.
Yes. I can pretty much guarantee this population is wrong, but we'll get that figured out and fix that. But yes, you are a second class district.
You've got all sorts of takers now, Nicole. So Roy School,
Okay. Let's see. Oh, where'd I go? Hold on a second, I lost my page. Nope. District classification. Sorry, going all over the place here. All
Gotta
right,
go to county, I think.
all right. I gotta get this out of my way. And we're gonna go to Roy. Roy is in Fergus County. They have a population of 295, so that should be a third class district. So there it is, third class.
okay.
And
Gardner Public,
Gardner Elementary High School, you have population 1455 for your elementary. That determines your classification. So you're going to be second class district. I
Okay.
saw Libby on there too,
yep.
across my screen. Libby, you have 10,000. You're going to be a first class district.
DeSmet,
Okay. DeSmet, you're at 1540, so that should make you a second class district. And DeSmet's an interesting one because we had a boundary issue there a few years back, but we got that figured out. They are in fact second class. So
let's see, Eureka,
Eureka, 5,021. So you are a second class district.
and last but not least, Colstrip, and then we'll just direct folks to
Yep, so you can go out now and find this report. Colstrip, you are at 2387. So you are a second class district. Now, Colstrip is one of those interesting ones because usually when districts have contiguous boundaries, they are K-12 districts. Colstrip does have contiguous boundaries as if they were a K-12, but they are exempted from going to K-12 because of impact aid funding. So just a little tidbit of information there. All right, so that's one of the things that we have on our website is that district classification. We'll talk more about districts required to report campaign finance. But the campaign finance provisions apply to all first class districts in counties with populations of 15,000 or more. So these are all the counties that have populations of 15,000 or more, and these are all the first class districts in those counties. And that's one of the reasons that we kind of bug Jack a lot about his districts is because when a district is first class, they have to report campaign finance. So this one needs to be updated because Big Fork's going to stay second class for now. And we need to add Evergreen in here because they're going to be first class. So we'll get that fixed and
Yeah,
updated.
that will be updated shortly.
Yep. So, all right. So those are all the districts that are first class in big counties. So interestingly enough. All right. Some of the other things that we have on here, these are the 2020 election webinars. So these are the weekly meetings we did last year. We'll be doing those again this year, and the schedule will be up here probably within the next week or so. If you go under ballot materials, all of your election administrator forms are out here. So these are all the forms that OPI has developed specific to school elections. So if I quit scrolling too fast, absentee ballot instructions, your certificate of election, certificate of trustee appointment. There's one here for the Board of Trustees to appoint. There's one here for the county superintendent. Instructions, electronic ballots, pretty much everything, election notices, all that is out here. Here's the sample contract with the counties. We talked about the who does what with an election. This is a good sample document that we worked with the county on to provide that information. So, all right. Let's see. Your election judge forms. So these are anything that would pertain specifically to your election judges that they would use the tally sheets, the return sheets. We'll talk more about those. The other thing that's good out here is your sample ballots. So if you want to know something about the language that you would use for a bond election or a building reserve election, any of these things out here, these sample ballots are out here. Technology gets a little confusing because of the changes to that law. So if you have questions on any of these, please don't ever hesitate to give us a call. All right, so that's, and then trustee information. These are your school board forms. So your school boards do the resolutions. They do the organization. I don't know why there's an old copy of the election calendar out here, but we'll get that out of there. And then your trustee candidate forms. So these are the forms your candidates are going to use when they file for election. All right, so let's go back to here. Lacey, yeah, don't panic. You're not on that list. Jack has decided to hold off on changing your classification until you get a year or two more under your belt as far as making sure that you really are going to stay above that 6,500. So we'll get that fixed today. All right. So another group that can help you out, of course, is Shelley at Masbo. They assist you with any aspect of the duties of district clerk, including school elections. They sponsor trainings like this one and conferences on a variety of topics, including school elections. So you'll see us at the MASBO Summer Conference. You'll see us at some of the spring workshops or the new clerks, the veteran clerk workshops. So we kind of collaborate on that training with them as well. They have a list of resources on their website, and they have staff available for assistance as well. So if you're not able for some reason to get a hold of us, you can always contact them and they'll help you out as well. Let's see here. So their website. So this is the MASBO website here. And if you go under one of these up here, gets you to, so here's professional development, the elections webinar. If you go under resources, there's elections there. Most importantly, here's their contact information. So if you've got questions, you can call these guys. So Steve will probably claim he doesn't know a lot about school elections, but he sat across from me for a long time. So I think he knows more than he'll admit to knowing. All right, let's go back. Okay, so the next player in school elections, they're appropriately called the COPS. They're Commissioner of Political Practices. They are in Title 13, Chapter 37. Oh, Steve is joining us. He says he knows nothing. Yeah. He claims he knows nothing. All right, so they're in Title 13, Chapter 37, Part 1. They were created in the 1975 legislative session. And basically, they are responsible for anything to do with money or other campaign practice violations. So they don't do things like, you know, the school district didn't publish a notice, therefore we should invalidate the election. They're more responsible for the financial aspect. So, you know, Joe has a campaign sign in his yard, but it doesn't say who paid for the sign. Those are the kind of questions that they take. Or, you know, this person is out, you know, disseminating information, and who are they with? So that's the kind of thing that they keep track of. And they maintain an electronic reporting system called CERS. And that's where candidates are going to report their information. So I'm going to share this screen again. So when you go to the Commissioner of Political Practices website, this is where you would go, is under candidate and committee information. And here you can find out about those campaign finance laws, the resources and guides, the reporting due dates. The only candidates that you really have to make sure that follow this are, again, if you are in a first-class district with populations of 15,000 or more, those are the ones that you have to direct to this site, because they need to know this information, because they will be required to comply with these laws. So we'll come back to that a little later in the presentation. All right. So again, this is their website. The other folks that can assist you are your district council or the county attorney. So, you know, we'll often tell you that, or tell someone who calls us that they need to speak with the county attorney, because the county attorney and the district court in your boundary area is the only one that has jurisdiction in proceedings in regard to school elections. So that's in 1336-103. So if someone has a complaint and thinks that something that you've done violates the law to the point that it has affected the outcome of the election, they need to take that to the district court, and that's where they would file an action. The OPI does not have any authority to invalidate an election or to sanction a school district. Again, that's solely and 100% the district court's responsibility. Okay, the last thing I want to show you here is this ArcGIS map. This map I find particularly helpful. I use this often, very, very often for a lot of different things. The really great part of this is that you can simply go up here to this find an address or place, and it will tell you all the information you need to know about that address or that place. And I'm going to get a live view of it right here. So you already saw my address, so I'm just going to type it back in here. So if I type in my address, it comes up exactly where my address is. And if you just click right here, it's going to tell you that I am within the Helena Elementary School District and I'm within the Helena High School District. So it's really helpful if you've got, you know, some boundaries that are a little less predictable. So I'm going to just scroll out. I'm going to go over here to our friends in Richland County. And you can see here's Richland County, and you can see that some of these school district boundaries, see all these interwoven lines. So inside of this boundary, for example, is Ritchie Elementary. But over here is Lambert Elementary. And then there's more Ritchie Elementary. So you've got some really odd boundaries over here. You know, there's a little box inside of here that belongs to, you know, Lambert High School, but it's right in the middle of a different school district. There's lots of, you know, things on the boundary line, or, you know, this part might go to your high school, this part might go to your elementary. So if you're, you know, got folks that have questions about where they're located, you can use this and just type in any address and it will tell you exactly where they are as far as which elementary and which high school district that they're in. So good resource if you're looking for that. The link to that again will be in the presentation that we'll post to the website as well. All right, so before we get started on the next portion, I think we'll go ahead and take like maybe a 10-minute break. Give everybody a chance to get up and stretch and grab a cup of coffee, and then we'll dive into the next section, which is the school district election calendar. So we'll give everybody about a 10-minute break and we'll come back. I have gone ahead and resumed the recording, so we'll get that going here and get started. All right, so we're going to talk about the school election calendar. So we'll go through all the dates and the timelines that are on that school election calendar. First of all, there are 2 versions of that calendar that are out there for you to use. We talked about that a little bit when we toured the OPI website. So we have the election calendar with forms, and we have the regular election calendar. Those were just both recently updated, so they should be the latest and greatest versions of those calendars. The regular school election calendar has the number of days from the election, what that actual deadline date is, It gives you some information about the event, and then it has the MCA citation. As I've done in this presentation, we like to include that MCA citation just so you know exactly where it comes from. And the calendar with forms has all the same things that the regular election calendar has, except that it has an additional column over there for form. So you will see that it directly will take you to whatever form is required for that deadline. So the very first thing that's on that trustee election calendar is, of course, your trustee candidates file for election. So this is the one that we joke is between Christmas and Easter or spring break. So between 145 days before and 40 days before, your candidates are going to be filing for election. There's a declaration of intent and an oath of candidacy that is for that election. And if you want a candidate's name to appear on the ballot, they have to file within this time period. One of the questions we get is, do candidates have to be registered to vote at the time that the oath is filed? And the answer is really not technically, because it says that they have to be a resident for 30 days and they have to be registered to vote at the time that they take office. And we have late registration, of course, but you want to make sure that your candidates are registered to vote. If they are not, give them a voter registration form and have them fill it out at the same time they fill out the oath. We have had a couple of instances in the past where people that were not registered were elected, and it gets kind of messy. So if you can get them to register at the time they file the oath, it kind of helps with that as well. All right, so one of the things that's a sticking point in the law is it says that a declaration of intent has to be filed with the school district clerk. There is no exception if the county is running the election. Those school district clerks are the ones that have to actually receive the declaration of intent. So if you are a county running a school election, or if the county is running your election for you, and someone turns in a form to the county, make sure that they have a way to get that to you immediately. Yes, for any school district position, they have to turn in a declaration of intent within that 145 to 40 days. And that does have to go to the school district clerk. We've had some circumstances where the county has collected them and not notified the clerk until after the deadline. And that has resulted in, I'll just put it nicely, some ruffled feathers. So make sure that the district clerk and the county are in collaboration when it comes to who's accepting those declaration of intent forms. Of course, we did away with the petition and the signatures a few years back, so you're not required to have a petition and signatures anymore. You just have to fill out that declaration of intent. So some very important things on that declaration of intent. You need to make sure that it clearly identifies the position that the person is applying for. Is this an elementary trustee position? Is this an outlying trustee position? If it's an outlying trustee position, which outlying trustee position is it? So make sure that that is all very specific, because it gets messy if it is not. Make sure that you clearly identify the term. Is it a 1-year term, a 2-year term, or a 3-year term? The person needs to have their name as it should appear on the ballot. So it can't contain any qualifiers. So if they're a doctor or a lawyer, they can't put that designation on their name, but they can put the name any way they want it to appear on the ballot. So if it's, you know, John Bubba Doe, they can put John, put Bubba in parentheses and Doe for the last name. however they want it to appear, as long as it doesn't have any qualifiers and it doesn't identify the candidate as an incumbent. They have to have a residential address on there because, of course, if there's no residential address, you can't verify that they're a resident of your school district. And this is a question I get a lot. Does this form have to be notarized? So yes and no. So it does have to be notarized unless they are signing it in front of the district clerk. Since the district clerk is the election official, they can just sign it in front of the district clerk, even if the district clerk is not a notary.
Okay, so I have a question. In the case of Evergreen, where they're adding 2 positions,
Yeah.
on the ballot, how do you identify it as 3? How do you identify it on the ballot?
So
for
it's
those
going
2
to
new
be,
Positions.
yep, it's going to be an elementary trustee position for, it's gonna look a little weird because of the way the law is. It says that they have to draw lots for that position. So you're gonna have, you know, elementary trustee, 3-year term. You're gonna have elementary trustee, term to be determined. You know, and then, so that one's gonna say vote 2. And then, you know, when you put it on your declaration of intent, you're gonna say elementary trustee, term to be determined, and that's where they're gonna get stuck in on that one.
Okay,
We have a few more questions that popped in. Does
Okay.
the name have to match the voter registration, like adding last name, not by marriage, but common law type of marriage, but they're not registered like that with the county?
So no, there's a spot on there for name, and then there's a name as they want it to appear on the ballot. So that portion, I mean, you have to have enough information that you can determine who they are and what their voter registration status is, but they can have their name on the ballot any way that they choose.
And then another quick question, does the district clerk, when they receive that I can't talk today, declaration of intent, should they be checking the driver's license like a notary would?
No, because this next part, at the bottom here, you should immediately verify voter registration, address, and signature with the county election administrator.
Okay.
So, the clerk's going to, scan or take a picture of this or walk it over to the county election office and say, I've got this declaration of intent. Will you please verify their voter registration and their signature? If they're telling you they're not registered or that they're going to register, you probably do want to check, you know, something, or if you don't know who they are, or have no way to verify who they are, you might choose to do that, but it's certainly not required.
And I would just suggest to the ARC website, the GIS website, also is a great way if they're not sure they live within your district to check their address as well. Do they actually live in the district, or are they on that boundary line? And then document when you actually confirm with the county election administrator, document that conversation that you've made that confirmation.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so here's that MCA that says the declaration of intent to be a candidate must be submitted to the clerk of the district. So there's no exception there if it's a county-run election. So just want to show you that that is actually in MCA. All right, so what do they need to be in order to be a trustee candidate? So they have to be qualified to vote in the district. They have to be registered to vote. They have to be 18 years of age or older, a resident of the state, and that should be county, missed an O there, sorry, for at least 30 days, a US citizen, not serving a sentence in a penal institution, and not adjudicated to be of unsound mind. So again, you know,
Ooh,
So, all right, so the exception would be single member districts. So we have a couple of those, single member districts. The difference between that and a regular district is, and all of these were court cases, so it was determined that the school board was not representative of the population of the school district. So they stepped in and they split these districts up into smaller, what they call single member districts. So instead of having 7 trustees elected at large, you now have a single trustee elected from a smaller portion of the entire district. And they'll usually divide these by, you know, area or neighborhood, or in the case of Hardin and Wolf Point, where you have some of the district on reservation and some off reservation. They'll divide it up so that you get a more, the goal is to get a more representative board of trustees. But when you have those single member districts, you have to be a resident of the trustee nominating district for at least 1 year. So that is the distinction between a general trustee candidate or an at-large trustee candidate and a single member trustee candidate. All right, so one of the things is that a trustee candidate or a trustee, not a trustee candidate, a trustee cannot be employed in any capacity by the trustee's own school district. So the question is, we have a poll question up there. Andrea, do we have one?
Hold on.
Sorry, put you on the spot there.
No. Signature verification,
Nope,
voter accessibility. Those are the only ones.
left. Okay, so we'll skip. I
Yeah.
don't know that poll question there. All right,
Okay.
so trustees can't be employed in any capacity at the time that they take office. So we get a lot of these questions because you've got a school district trustee that's retiring at the end of the school year and they want to run for school board. Typically in that capacity, I would tell you that, you know, they need to check with the retirement system to see if their employment is going to be ended by the time that they need to sign that certificate. If it's not, you know, they need to wait a year. So they can't be employed. If they're a paraprofessional or, you know, work in the lunchroom or maintenance or whatever, and they want to run for school, they just need to make sure that they are no longer employed at the time that they accept the oath of office or they take the oath of office. So. All right, so again, trustee candidate filing is open from December through March. There is 0 legal requirement to advertise candidate filing. That being said, we highly encourage you to take an active role in advertising, both in the number and type of openings and in the filing deadlines. So we ask, you know, some of the places you could take and put some advertisements might be in public locations. You might post it on the door of the school. You might put it down at the post office or the library. Put something in your school newsletter. A lot of times local papers, especially around, you know, the time when you're trying to get candidates, they'll run a story. You can do a paid advertisement, but I don't think that's usually necessary. Usually local newspapers are happy to run stories for you. If your district has a Facebook or Instagram or, you know, other Twitter, social media accounts, you can do that. If you have some other ideas, you know, please feel free to throw them in the chat there or raise your hand and let us know. But the more active role you can take in advertising, I think it's the better for school districts because we get a lot of those questions that come into our office about, hey, what positions does this school district have available, or how do I run for school district here? So if you can get that information out to your electors or to the folks in your district, we highly recommend that. All right, so we talked a little bit about this already, but if you are a trustee candidate in a first-class district in counties with populations of 15,000 or more, that list is available on our website. So make sure that if you are one of those districts, that you are letting your candidates know that they have a responsibility to file with the Commissioner of Political Practices. There are no paper forms anymore. It is 100% online. Districts have the responsibility to notify those candidates, but it is ultimately the candidate's responsibility to complete the filing requirements. Last year, I worked with the Commissioner's office and they were sending me, it wasn't always weekly, but they were sending me updates on who had registered and who had not. Does anybody want to volunteer if that was helpful or not? Not helpful? Yay, nay? I'm happy to hear the negative as much as the positive. I was sending those notifications out as often as I was getting them saying, here's the people that have registered. If you have other candidates, let them know. So thank you, Lucy. So yeah, I love Missoula County's website because it tells you who all those candidates are and it's got all that information up there. It's a really nice website, but okay, good. Great Falls said it was helpful. Good, good. All right, so that's something we'll keep up with this year. I'll let them know they can keep sending us that information. I'll show you two really quick here. I'll go back to their website because there is a way that you can check on it as well. So if you got a candidate that swears that they're registered, let's see if I can spell. So if you go to that, you go under candidate and candidate information, you should be able to go to this campaign finance. So if you go to access CERS and you go to candidate, you can actually search for a candidate and it will, you type in their name and you hit search and it'll tell you whether they're registered or not. So that's kind of nice too. But we'll continue to send out those notifications. But if you've got somebody that swears that they're on there, you can go in there and just show them, hey, you're not showing up on here. And if you think you should be, contact these guys. So that's helpful as well. All right. So what happens when folks don't register on the Commissioner of Political Practices website? Does anybody know? So if they fail to register with the Commissioner of Political Practices by the time of ballot certification, their name cannot appear on the ballot. So, yep, they're not eligible to run. Yeah, their name doesn't go on the ballot. So that's what you can tell them, I mean, if you call them and say, hey, you're still not registered. If you're not on there by Friday, you're not going to have your name on the ballot. So. All right. So again, on our website, here's this districts required to report campaign finance activity. We will get that updated this week so that the correct districts are on there. But if your name's on there, your candidates are required to file. So these are the questions that we get all the time. I'm not going to receive or spend money. Do I still have to file? Yes, you have to file. What you will not have to do is report any activity. So one of the things is when you register on that site, you're going to say, I'm a B candidate or a C candidate. And when you register, if you're not going to spend money or receive money, you're going to file as a B candidate. And what that means is that you don't have to file the campaign finance reports. If you are going to spend and receive money in excess of $500, you have to file campaign finance reports. So everybody has to register, but you only have to file the finance reports if you spend or receive more than $500. So again, there's no paper forms. A couple of years ago, they still had paper forms. You could give them a packet when they register. Now everything is electronic. So you might want to add, if you are one of those districts that require people to report, you might want to add the website and highlight it and say, remember, you've got to take care of this or your name doesn't appear on the ballot. Everything's electronic. All right. The next deadline that you have is your election resolution. So this is, what we call the Valentine's Day reminder. At least 70 days before the election, you have to call for an election. I know some school districts do this as early as December, and that's okay too. They want to align that with their candidate filing. But make sure you do this at least 70 days before the election. Question I get, oh darn, I didn't do it in 70 days. Does that mean I don't have to have an election? No, you still have to have an election, but you're just late on filing for it, which means that you have to have a trustee election because that's required by law, but you will not be allowed to have any other type of election on school election day. So here are all the dates and the deadlines and the MCAs for that. One of the things I get asked all the time is one of the requirements is that you have to have the names of 3 election judges on your election resolution. I didn't make that up. It says right here in 2020-203 that on your resolution, you have to appoint at least 3 election judges for each polling place. Does that mean that those are the ones that have to serve? No, you can substitute, but you have to put names on there of 3 people. You can use last year's, you can use 3 names you get from the county, whatever you want to do, but you do have to have those names on there. The other thing that has to be on that is you have to have the date of the election, obviously, the purpose of the election, whether you're doing it by mail or by poll. What are your voting locations? What are their boundaries? And if you're going to open the polls before noon, what time those polls will open? And of course, the names of those 3 election judges. So question, if it's an all mail ballot election, do you still have to list the election judges? Yes, because you're still going to have election judges. Every election has to have election judges, regardless of type. Okay, so there's no public notice requirements related to the election resolution itself. That's all wrapped up in the fact that it is a board resolution. So it's included in your board minutes. It should be in your properly noticed agenda. It's presented in a properly noticed meeting. So no additional requirements there. Important thing here, any election that you're considering has to be included in the election resolution. So if you're not sure that you're going to run a building reserve levy, for example, but you think you might think about it before ballot certification, make sure that you include that in your resolution. You can put anything and everything in the resolution. That's fine too. It's just you can't add it later. So if you pass your election resolution in December you can make amendments up to that 70-day deadline. So if you pass it in December and decide in January that you really do want to run a building reserve, you can amend your resolution to include that. But if you pass your resolution in February and you decide in March that you need a building reserve or a general fund levy after you get your data sheets from OPI, you're out of luck. You can't run it. If you are in that legislative year, you can run a second election, but you can't include it in your regular school election. So no amendments after that 70-day deadline. So get everything in there that you might possibly be considering. Question, I can't read all of it, so I'll let Shelley handle that one.
If we're considering a high school general fund levy and we have a high school rep outlying district up, is it 2 resolutions? So would
Yeah.
they post 2 resolutions, separate resolutions?
Hold that thought, we'll get there.
Okay, and then should schools just add everything to the resolution?
I kind of recommend it, kind of like with that permissive levy notice we talked about at the very beginning. It's better to have something in there that you don't need than to not have something in there that you need later, right? Better to have too much than not enough.
Yep, that was my motto as well, is to cover your bases so that you had every opportunity to run whatever you needed to moving forward.
Yep. So yeah, if you don't think you need a building reserve and you don't put it in there, and then in March your boiler goes out, well, you've kind of blown your chance to get some money to help with that, right? So yeah, put everything in there, and doesn't obligate you to do anything, but it certainly keeps you from missing out on something you might need. Important things there: if you do hold an election outside of the regular school election date, make sure that you understand you still have to meet all statutory deadlines. So if you decide you're going to do that general fund levy at a date other than the school election because of the legislative session, you want to look at that deadline, which is July 31 for running that election, and then go backwards 70 days and say, my absolute deadline for getting this into this next year's budget is going to be X date. So if we decide we want to run a later election, this is the last day we can make that decision. And then the important thing too is that you don't have to have final levy amounts in your resolution, but that does need to be finalized before ballot certification. So at 70 days, you have to say, we are going to, we want to include in this election a building reserve levy. And then 30 days before the election, you're going to say, we're going to do a building reserve levy in X amount of dollars. So that's the difference between the resolution and certification. All right, so separate resolutions. This is the answer to Lacey's question. Separate resolutions for separate legal entities. So in the example of an outlying trustee and a high school levy, those are both high school issues, so those can go on one resolution. If you have an elementary trustee and a high school levy, that should be on 2 separate resolutions. Make sure that in your resolution that you clearly identify the number of open positions, the terms, the requirements or the boundaries for each open position. So when you put that outlying trustee position on your resolution, you want to say not just one outlying trustee for a 3-year term, you want to say one outlying trustee from elementary school district A and elementary school district B for a 3-year term. The other thing is there's no provision in law to reschedule a trustee election if you make a mistake on the election resolution. So if you accidentally say, we're going to elect 4 trustees, but you don't say the term or who is electing them, you don't necessarily make an amendment to your resolution, but you might pass some clarifying information, or when you do your advertisement, you're going to want to very particularly clarify and say, you know, we passed in our resolution that there were 4 positions. Here's the clarifying information on those 4 positions. 2 are 3-year terms for the elementary. 1 is a 2-year term for the elementary, and 1 is a high school outlying trustee for X and Y. So you don't get to reschedule it though. You just need to issue some clarifying information for your electors. Very important that you have a language in the resolution that allows the election administrator, either the clerk or the county, to cancel the election. Common reasons for cancellation would be election by acclamation, or if a levy or a proposition are no longer necessary, or any other contingency that might happen. If you don't include that language on your resolution, the board has to hold a properly noticed meeting prior to an election deadline. So if it doesn't say that your clerk can cancel the election by acclamation, and your board doesn't meet to cancel that election by acclamation, you have to go ahead and run that election. Even, I mean, you have to go through the expense and everything of having that election, even though you really didn't need to. The sample resolution does include that language. Yes, correct. And I would highly recommend that you go out and take a look at, sometimes school districts will have an election resolution that they've had, you know, saved in their own file for years and years and years, and they've never got it updated to the latest and greatest versions that we have on the OPI website. So it might be a good idea to go out and check what your resolution language says compared to what the OPI forms currently say, just to make sure that everything you would need would be in that resolution. All right, so if anybody is thinking about running a bond election, there are some additional requirements for the election resolution. So in addition to all the other things that you have to have in your resolution, you also need to be very specific about the type of bond that you're going to run. Is it general obligation? Is it oil and gas? Is it impact aid? Here you have to include the exact amount. So with a levy, you include the exact amount at the time of ballot certification. With a bond, the exact amount has to be in the election resolution. You also have to include the maximum number of years to be repaid. That would be up to 30. And you have to get an estimated school facilities advance. So you have to notify OPI that you're planning to run a bond election, give us some information about the amount and the number of years, and then we can give you that estimated school facilities advance amount so that you can include that in your resolution. Here's the MCA that outlines all those additional requirements for a trustee resolution calling for a bond election. A couple other things here. In addition to the campaign finance requirements that apply to trustees, there are also campaign finance requirements that apply to levy and bond elections. So again, this only applies to first-class districts in counties with populations of 15,000 or more. So if you are one of those and you're running a levy or a bond election, you might want to consider going in and putting in your campaign finance. Here's why. There are 2 types of committees. There is an incidental committee and a ballot issue committee. And this is why you would go in and put in your information, because you are an incidental committee. If even if you're not specifically organized to support or a ballot issue, but you're just putting out information, you by default are a political committee because you either receive money or you make an expenditure. So if, for example, you print an informational flyer that you stick in the kids' backpacks that say, hey, here's why we're running this, building reserve levy, you've now spent money, right? Even if it's just informational for something that's on a ballot. You have to file reports if you have expenditures or receive money in advance of or in excess of $500. A ballot issue committee is one that is specifically organized to support or oppose a ballot issue. So if you have an educational foundation or a PTA group that is actively going out and soliciting support for a bond or a levy, you want to make sure that they know that they have to go out and register with the Commissioner of Political Practices. So these are the biggest complaints that we get, are that people are either indirectly publishing information or directly supporting or opposing something, but have not reported to the Commissioner of Political Practices. Another thing to note is that any school district can report campaign finance. You don't have to be in that first class district in order to report. So if you're in an area where there's a lot of scrutiny on your elections or what you are doing as a school district, you might choose to voluntarily put your information into the commissioner's website, just so people can see exactly what you're doing and exactly what you're spending money on. So if you're a second class district and you're trying to pass a bond and you've got a lot of people saying, hey, you're sending out information or you're doing X or Y or Z, you can point them to the commissioner's site and say, yep, and I'm telling you exactly here on this website how much money we're taking in and how much money we're spending, for sending out flyers or holding town hall meetings or, whatever. So you always have that option to report and to show your expenditures and your contributions, even if you're not a first class district. You are only required to do it if you are a first class district and your county is 15,000 or more. Anything that's an electioneering communication, that comes into that incidental committee. So you become an incidental committee when you do any publication that you have to pay for. So if you print paper, that costs money. Or if you do a radio ad or a TV ad, you have something on cable, satellite, an internet website, even those, community calendars that are on the TV. If you do a story or post something in the newspaper, you write an article that shows up in a newsletter or some kind of town hall meeting. I don't know, whoever prints periodicals in your area. If you have something on a billboard, if you stick something in the mail that goes out to your electors, other distributions, notes in the kids' backpacks or whatever, any of those things that you do that are done within 60 days of an election, whether they're support, opposition, or just informational, if they are received by more than 100 people in that district, that is considered an electioneering communication and should be reported. So just be aware of those requirements. That does generate a whole lot of calls from not school districts, but individuals in your school districts that, we get those questions all the time. Well, I got this, or this is going out, who's paying for this, and why are they doing this kind of thing? So just be aware of that. Try to be as transparent as possible with anything that you're doing in regard to those kinds of activities. Okay, so after you file those election resolutions, what's your next step? The next step should be that you send that resolution to the county election administrator. The county election administrators are our friends. We need to make sure that anything we're doing with the school election, that we are contacting that county election administrator because they have to get stuff for us for our elections. They can help us with our elections in addition to things that they are required to do. They might, they have to do the voter registration piece, but if you talk to them, they might be able to provide you with, some help with your signature verification. They might be able to help with ballot collection. They might be able to give you some training. I really encourage this is go down to the county election office and find your county election administrator and buy them a cup of coffee. Do it now when they're not quite so busy with things and before you actually need something, and introduce yourself and have a conversation and talk about your elections and, have a good relationship with them, because the nicer you are to them and the more communication you have with them, the more likely I think they are to help in any way that they can. So that would be my plug for the day, is go make friends with your county election administrator. They are a great resource. They're great people. They're really dedicated to elections, and every one of them I've ever talked to is more than happy to help. So if you are one of those school districts that is located in multiple counties, make sure that you know who the county election administrators are in every county in which you have electors, and make sure that you're communicating with every single county, because it's a coordination effort. They're going to have to work together. You're going to have to work together and coordinate everything with them. If you are thinking about scheduling an election outside of the regular school election deadline, make sure that you are talking with your county election office and make sure that it's okay with them, the date that you selected. A lot of times, this is a little quieter year, I think, because it's not, this year's 23 will be a little quieter year because it's not a primary or a federal election year. But when they have to run those primaries a month after the school election, that's where we get into some conflict, because there's a lot of work that they have to do both before and during and after that election. And so you want to coordinate those election dates with them. Also, if you're looking at running an election in the November timeframe, they have to run an election in November of every year. So make sure you're coordinating those dates. All right, so we already talked a little bit about mail ballot plans. That 60 days before is a very, very hard deadline. You have to meet that 60 days before, and note that it's an at least. So if you pass your election resolution in December, you can send them your mail ballot plan, December, January, February. That hard deadline, of course, then is that Friday, March 3rd. So why do we have mail ballot elections? Well, because we have a large number of absentee voters already. So if 50% or more of your electors are absentee, do you want to sit there all day? So, between noon and 8 with 3 people that you're paying and only have 10 people come in and vote. A lot of folks do it because there's one process. You don't have to have poll election and absentee. You can just send everybody a ballot and it's all done. A lot of folks say the post-election process is faster. So if you are running a poll election and you want to start counting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you have to have a second set of 3 paid people to come in and start counting. If you're running a mail ballot election, you can have one set of 3 people that come in at 3 o'clock and they can start counting. So it might go faster than if you were paying 6 people. A lot of people do it for bond elections because you don't have that voter turnout threshold. So if you're running a bond election at certain times, if you don't have a minimum % of voter turnout, you're going to end up having to have a higher threshold than 50% in order to pass that bond. Any other reason that anybody wants to share that might have a mail ballot election? That I haven't mentioned?
Quick question on the chat. The people who actually do the counting of the ballots, are they judges or other people?
So election judges are the ones that have to count their ballots. They might be called like an absentee counting board or a counting board, but those are comprised of election judges. Okay, so how do I initiate a mail ballot election? Okay. With a mail ballot election, do judges have to accept ballots until 8 p.m.? Yes, ballots are accepted in any election until 8 p.m. And they don't have to be accepted by judges. You would just simply have ballot boxes that are manned by staff that, you know, are there. It doesn't have to be a judge that accepts a ballot for a mail ballot election.
So in that case, Nicole, they can start counting before 8, but they can't finish counting until 8:01.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so how hard is it to initiate a mail ballot election? Well, it's pretty simple. In the resolution, you just put mail ballot as your election type. And then, of course, you have to complete that mail ballot plan and make sure it is submitted and received by the deadline for mail ballot plans. It's that simple. Oops. Okay, so some of the questions that we get about the mail ballot plans. It is one plan per election. So I'll use the example that we had earlier about the high school levy and the high school outlying high school trustee. That is two separate mail ballot plans, even though it is on the same resolution and the same legal entity. And the reason that we do that is because it is a separate set of electors. So a high school levy, for example, would be voted on by the elementary district where the high school is located and any additional territory outside of the elementary that's part of the high school. A outlying high school trustee is only voted on by that elementary district or that area that is designated as that nominating district for that high school trustee position. So you might have 100 electors for the outlying high school trustee position and 3,000 electors for the high school levy. So it just keeps you on track for who gets what ballot, because that's really important when it comes to these elections. So if you have an elementary trustee position, even if it's a varying term, it still would be on one plan. Outlying high school trustee would be on its own plan. An elementary levy or an elementary proposition would be on its own. And a high school levy or high school proposition would be on its own. I'll show you how that works. So we looked at the forms earlier. You can either use that search function and type in mail ballot and it'll bring up the mail ballot plan. Or you can go under that accordion folder and go to mail ballot forms and select the mail ballot timetable and instructions. The mail ballot plan is form fillable. So it's a form fillable Word document. And you want to submit that directly to the Secretary of State's office by email, fax, regular mail, or personal delivery. Be aware that if you send it by regular mail, it has to be received by the close of business on the due date. There's no contingency for postmarked by. So if you send it by regular mail, you want to make sure you send it in plenty of time for them to receive it by the due date. And you'll want to call them if you don't get some kind of verification from them that they have actually physically received it. You know, like was mentioned earlier, did you send it to the correct email address? Did you transpose a letter in the email? you should get some kind of verification that it's received if you send it in and they actually receive it. All right, so here's what that looks like. This first section here is the written plan. You want to put in the legal name of the jurisdiction, the county or counties. So if you're multiple located, make sure that you enter every single county in here. The estimated number of electors. So this is where you kind of really start to think about who's going to get a ballot for this election. And if you need to get an estimated number of electors, contact your county election office. They should be able to help you with that. Under type of election, so this is where you're going to do one plan per type. You select the one here that you're doing. So you're going to have one for the trustee, one for the levy. And then describe the procedures. Whoops. That will ensure security. That comes up automatically. How are you going to print your ballots? You're printing them by district. And then you have to specify your signature verification procedures for a school election. So let's take a look at that. So again, legal name, that's your district name, all your counties. Get your number of electors from the county election office. Keep your elector group separate. Okay, so verification procedures, that's going to be who's going to do your signature verification. Is that going to be the school or the county? All right, so here's, let's see. Oh, okay, ballots printed on, and that's district. Transport procedure, there's only one option there. Transport procedures. So we get a lot of questions about how secure is a school election. I think that we need to be aware as school district clerks or as election officials that there's a lot of scrutiny on elections right now, and we need to take every step possible to ensure that every ballot is protected as well as we can protect it. So make sure you understand the security procedures, make sure everything's in a locked box, have seals, and if you open it, you should have a log of when you opened the box and why you opened it, that kind of thing. So, all right, so go.
Quick question.
Yes,
This just came to me. It's not exactly on topic. Can the district clerk be both the election administrator and a judge if they are certified by the county election office as a judge?
okay. Can we put that one on hold for just a second till we get to election judges?
Yep.
I'll let you remind me of that one when we get there.
Okay.
All right, so timetable, these are the first section of this. So a lot of these don't make sense by school districts, so I get a lot of questions on this. Date applicable documents sent to the governing body. This should be the date of the election resolution. The actual date of submission is going to be the date that you submit the mail ballot plan to the Secretary of State's office. The last day to opt out of a mail ballot is 55 days before the election. So if you put your plan in and then you decide you don't want to run a mail ballot, just opt out. The Secretary of State is responsible for approving, disapproving, or recommending changes. So you don't have to put any information in box 4. And 5 is the dates for the close of regular registration notice. This is a notice, again, published by the county election office. So you need to contact them for dates. So get those dates from your county election office before you fill out your mail ballot plan. And here's the second half of that form. So your publication dates for notice of election, your close of voter registration, your beginning of late registration, the date on which you're going to mail your ballots on election day. I was talking to Andrea yesterday and she had a really good suggestion. You should have a copy of your school election calendar with you when you fill this out so that you can make sure that all these dates, 1 through 5 and 6 through 10, all line up with the dates that are on your election calendar. So you don't want to put a date for publication of notice of election that is outside of the window for publication of that notice. So I get this question a lot. If you look at the notice of election, you'll see that there are first, second, and third date in here. Be aware that only one notice is required for a school election. So if you only enter one date, that's okay. The Secretary of State's office is not going to reject your plan because you didn't put in the second, third date. Only one date's required for school elections. Again, get that close of registration and beginning of late registration from your election calendar. I'll probably say this a few times during this presentation, but that date ballots are mailed is a very important date. That is the date that you have to mail all of your ballots. Make sure that you mail all of them on this date. It never fails. I get a call. We left a tray of ballots in the back of somebody's car and they didn't get mailed. Try to make sure that you know where all your ballots are and you get them all mailed on the same date. It doesn't necessarily immediately invalidate your election if you don't get them mailed. But it is a very short turnaround. So if you mail, you know, a group of ballots 3 days later than you mail the rest of them, you might have to make some contingencies for how you're going to collect those ballots. In the example that we had last year, they mailed a group of ballots to one particular area later than they had mailed all the rest of them because it got left somewhere. So what they did is they set up an additional ballot collection station specifically in that area so that people could make sure that they got their ballots collected. So be aware of where your ballots are, try to get them all mailed on the same date. It kind of helps eliminate some of those phone calls to me. And it also, you know, helps to eliminate phone calls to you or angry phone calls to you as well. Let's see. All right. So the second part of the mail ballot plan is your instruction sheet. So there's an instruction sheet that is included as part of that mail ballot plan that has to be approved by the Secretary of State's office. This is what that looks like. So it's kind of a 2-column thing there on one page. You want to make sure that you include the address and hours for all places of deposits, both before and on election day. So if you are a 4-day week school and you're only going to have your place of deposit open Monday through Thursday, you need to make sure that you put in there specifically what days and what times you're going to be available to collect ballots. Make sure that you include the election date and the amount of postage required to return the ballot. And then that last section is contact information for the election administrator. It can be either the district clerk or the county, whoever's running the election. And make sure that you include there too, not just necessarily the contact information, but also include the dates and times the election administrator is available, if not available during regular days and times. So if you work from home, or if you work, you know, part-time, or you work 3 days a week, you want to make sure that you have in there when people can get a hold of you. So that's kind of one of the biggest differences between county elections and school elections is that most counties are, you know, probably not 9 to 5, but they have very regular hours, Monday through Friday, where they have staff available. You know, somebody may take vacation or somebody may call in sick, but they have staff available Monday through Friday, very regular times. Whereas school districts, as I said, may have 4-day weeks. They may have part-time district clerks or election administrators. And if that's the case, we need to be very transparent about what those days and times are. You might also consider posting on your school district website or physically on the doors of your building, especially if you have locked buildings, days and times when folks are available for election questions. So that's another recommendation as well. But I would say that's one of the biggest questions that we get is, you know, hey, I'm trying to get a hold of so-and-so at this school regarding an election. What do you know? And I don't have the information on your days and times. So making that transparent to your electors any way you can is really important. Again, I said it before, but make sure that all your ballots are mailed on the same day. And it has to be the date that's in your mail ballot plan. Make sure that the list that you get from the county election office is only active and provisionally registered electors. Sometimes the counties will click the wrong button. Accidents happen. There's a lot of new clerks out there. Double check that you're only sending these to active and provisionally registered electors. Anaconda had a situation a few years back where they got inactive as well as active and provisionally registered. So they sent out hundreds of ballots that they would not have had to have sent out. And most of those came back as undeliverable. So that was a lot of extra work for them in that election. So double check your list and make sure you're getting the correct list. The other thing that's important is ballots have to be mailed as non-forwardable to the address that's provided on the elector's voter registration card or the address provided on an absentee ballot form. So we can't send them out anywhere else unless we have some other kind of verification or authorization to send it elsewhere. Some best practices, I would really highly recommend you meet with your post office before you put a date in ink on your mail ballot plan. Especially in some smaller communities, post offices may have irregular dates and times. There's been a lot of consolidation in terms of where does mail go before it actually goes anywhere. So if I want an envelope to go to a PO box at a post office in Helena, even if I walk into that same post office, it's going to take 2 days for that letter to get to this PO box that is 10 feet to my left. And the reason for that is because all the mail goes to a central processing in Great Falls, and then it comes back to Helena. So talk with your post office, find out about how many days it's going to take for mail to come back to your community. You may look at an earlier date, you may look at a later date. Maybe Thursdays are a really bad day for your post office, or maybe Fridays. Maybe they say bring them in. If you want to do it on Tuesday, bring them in Tuesday at 1, but that's the day you have a regular staff meeting. So talk with them first and get a good firm commitment as to what's the best date for doing that mailing. Make sure all your envelopes are United States Postal Service compliant. You want to make sure that it is election mail as much as you can. And they can also help you find the most cost-effective means to mail your ballots. So you might be able to do it as bulk mail. You might be able to, combine with, somebody else in order to use bulk mail. Those are some things I've heard. That link that you see on the bottom where it says election mail, that takes you to the Secretary of State site where they have that training on election mail. So there's some really good tips and pointers in there for sending out ballots and all that as well.
One quick thing to consider too with that.
Yes.
We had a school who had a mail service that picked up all their mail and delivered it to the post office. And somehow one box got set aside, so things didn't get mailed out at the same time. So make sure to talk, if you hire a mail service as well, to talk to them about that.
That's a really good tip. And I've talked to a couple of school districts that actually have their printer stuff and mail all their ballots for them. So you want to communicate with them as well, the importance of making sure that all of these go out and go out on a specific date. Again, be advised that your form, your mail ballot form, is a contract and that you have to adhere to the dates and times in your plan. So if your printer gets them out, ready to go 3 days early and sends them out, then you're not in compliance with your mail ballot plan. So you want to make sure to talk with them. Again, make sure that you have staff available to receive ballots during the days and times listed in your instructions, and that your election administrator is available to assist during those days and times as well. Yeah. All right, switching gears, notice of close of regular registration, that is a county function now, but make sure that you contact your county and ensure that it's run in every county. So those joint located counties, you want to contact all of them and make sure that it's going to get run everywhere with your name on it. Candidate withdrawal. So this is one of those dates that you have to be available until 5 p.m. This is the candidate withdrawal date. It's the last day they can have their name withdrawn so that they don't appear on the ballot. They can withdraw at any time prior to the deadline. There is no specific form for withdrawal. They just need to tell you either in person, by regular mail, fax, or email. Of course, if they come in person, you're probably going to want them to at least scribble on a piece of paper, my name is, and I'm withdrawing from this election. Try to get something in writing. Especially if you get a fax or an email or a regular mail that's not signed, you want to get some kind of verification that the statement was actually submitted by the candidate. And you want to be advised too that if a candidate fails to withdraw in time, their name still has to go on the ballot, whether they want it to or not. And they can still win the election. They just have the option to either accept by filing their oath of office, or they can reject by not filing the oath of office. And then in that case, of course, it would go to an appointment, and then the remainder of the term would be elected the next year. All right, write-in candidates. So your write-in candidates also have to submit a declaration of intent and an oath of candidacy for write-in candidates. A lot of this is the same as regular candidates. So they need to clearly identify the position, the term, the residential address. They need to either have it notarized or signed with the district clerk. You have to still verify their registration, their address, their signature with the county. All of that is exactly the same as a regular candidate. What differs with write-in candidates is that they need to provide you with the variations on their first or last name, because the votes for write-in candidates only count when a variation matches exactly. So for I can use my own name as an example, because pretty much everybody who writes my name, at least for the first time, transposes the O and the U. So my last name is Thuo. If I submit a write-in candidate form and that's the only variation that I put on there, and somebody submits, checks the box and writes my name, but they spell it Thou, that vote does not count for me. It's only when that variation matches exactly. So you might want to make sure that they understand that. The example I regularly use is we had an election here in Helena where we had 8 write-in candidates. And there was one candidate who submitted an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, front and half of the back in 10-point font with hundreds of variations of her name. And another gentleman submitted like 2 variations of his name, and he had a lot of votes that didn't count for him because people didn't have variations that matched what he submitted. Again, the candidates can prepare and disseminate labels, but that label has to be affixed to that spot, and the voter has to fill in the box next to the candidate's name. So it has to be a 2-part process, not just stick the sticker on there. Question from Phillips County.
Yep, so during the general election, the election administrators found that some county attorneys read the election law that only the first name can have variations and the last name has to be exact. Is this different in the school section of law?
That's interesting. I have not heard that before. If you want to send me some more information on that, I'd be happy to look at that. As far as I know, and from what I've seen in an election, it has to match completely first and last name, based on a variation provided by the elector.
Yeah, I have not heard that either. So, and I've always had folks who have submitted variations of last names on their form as the write-in, and then we knew just that, like what Nicole had with her last name. So that's an interesting interpretation.
Yeah, very much so.
Hi, Nicole. This is Lucy from Whitefish. Can I add something to that?
Of course you can.
This is interesting. So I volunteered during the midterm election count at Flathead County in Kalispell, and I was part of the resolution board, and I sat on the write-in candidate resolution board. And we had several variations of the candidate's last name allowed. So we had this sheet where both variations of his first and last name were allowed. So I'm surprised to hear what was just written in the chat. We didn't practice it last month when I was at the resolution board. So I think there should be several versions of the last name allowed.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm looking forward to getting some more information. I'll do some research on that and definitely get some more information out to folks if there is any change in the way we have interpreted it thus far. So. All right, so the other thing to be aware that write-in candidate qualifications are exactly the same as regular candidates, including filing requirements with the Commissioner of Political Practices. Obviously, the penalty is that they don't, wouldn't be that their name is not on the ballot, but if they have not complied with those regulations, I'm going to guess that they can't win the election either. I've never had this situation happen, but that would be my guess. This is one of those deadlines that regardless of whether this date, which happens to be a Thursday, and whether 5 o'clock is your regular working hours, this is one of those dates where you have to be available on this Thursday until 5 p.m. in order to receive these write-in candidate filing forms. So make sure that you're available until 5 o'clock, that you're checking your fax, that you're checking your email, that you're getting your regular mail, or that you're available in person to receive these forms until 5 o'clock on this date. The problem with this date is that for most school districts, this is during spring break. I get several calls every year from somebody who waits till 4:50 PM on this Thursday to file a form. And I get the phone call that I showed up at 4:50 at the school district and nobody is there. If you are not going to be physically at the location, or if your school district is on break and you are not at the school, we highly recommend posting on your doors or putting something on your website or both, or in some other way advertising that even though we are on spring break or that there is no one physically available at the school to receive your form, this is who you need to contact and this is how you contact them. So that they are aware that this is what the change that's happening. And if they show up at your door at 4:50 and they call you because your cell phone is on that posting on the door, then you can consider that received by 5 PM because they are at the right spot to receive that. So just be aware of those kind of things. If there's a change in availability, make sure that you notice that as well as you can.
I may have missed it, but is that true for the filing date on March 23rd also, that you have to be available till 5 o'clock?
There is no requirement for 5 o'clock
Okay.
there, but it does say received. So I'm gonna guess if you get an email at 11:59 PM, that is received on March, whatever that date is,
23rd?
23rd. So yes,
Okay.
that 5 o'clock only applies to withdrawal and write-in candidates.
Okay.
The other ones don't have times. So the other question we get quite a bit is when do write-in votes count? Write-in votes count only for those who have submitted a declaration of intent as a write-in candidate by the deadline, or if nobody filed as a regular candidate and nobody files as a write-in candidate, and the district places the race on the ballot. So we'll talk about acclamation here in a minute, but if you have a 3-year position and 2 people have filed for the 1 3-year position, and you have a 1-year position that nobody files for, either as a regular candidate or a write-in candidate, you have to put both of those races on the ballot. In that case, then what would happen is anybody that gets written in and who qualifies can win. I've only seen this happen one time where somebody got 2 votes and 2 write-in votes, and they actually won. So it doesn't happen often, but if you have somebody that files as a write-in candidate and you get 10 John Does, but John Doe didn't file as a write-in candidate, even if the legally filed write-in candidate only gets 1 vote, they still win that election. So that's how that works.
So if John Doe got 10 votes and there wasn't anybody else, would you have to verify after the election, verify their residence and that they're a registered voter?
Right, because they can't qualify unless they meet all the
Okay.
requirements to be a trustee, correct? All right, here's the thing that I think, at least I found is the scariest for everybody, is this word ballot certification. So it sounds super technical, it sounds super scary. What do I have to do? What does ballot certification really mean? All it really means is that you are done with any changes. So your ballot's in your final form, you know who your candidates are, you're not going to make any further changes. Your final levy amounts, if you're going to run those elections, have been approved by the trustees. Everything is ready to send to the printer. That is all that ballot certification is.
Quick question. It looks like Nicole, would the vote that Jack talked about become a provisional vote?
No. And we'll talk more about that, but no, it wouldn't be provisional because an elector's ballot is provisional, not a winner.
And I would just suggest with, when you're, certifying or, finishing out your ballots, you've looked at this a ton, so it looks familiar to you, have somebody else look at it. Because a lot of times it makes complete sense to you, and then somebody else will look at it and check it and be like, oh, yep. So proofreading is super important before you send them off.
Yep, and we'll talk about that when we get to the election process a little bit more too. Because there's a lot of things about the ballot we'll want to make sure are correct. All right, election by acclamation. We call this party day in a lot of districts, or the day that you hold your breath. Because this is the date that you get to cancel your election if you have less than or equal to the number of open positions. So you have 1 3-year position, you have 1 person file, yay, you don't have to run an election. So this is the other question I get quite a bit. You can cancel an election, but you cannot cancel a race within that election. So here are some examples. So if you have a 3-year elementary position and you have 2 filed candidates, you have a 1-year position and 1 filed candidate, can you put just the 3-year position on the ballot? And the answer is no. You have to put both on the ballot because they are both elementary trustee positions. They are 1 election, same set of voters. So both of them have to be on the ballot. For the 1-year position, is anybody going to win except the 1 filed candidate? And the answer is no. But you still have to put it on the ballot. If you have a 3-year elementary position and 2 candidates, and you have an outlying position with 1 candidate, can you cancel the 1-year position? The answer is yes, because it's a completely separate set of electors. It's a completely separate election. One's a high school, one's an elementary. So yes, in that case, you can cancel the high school position and run just the elementary.
But what if you've already certified your ballot and sent it to the printer earlier that day?
If you've done that, then you just, well,
Immediately
you
call the
can either
printer?
destroy all the ballots because you didn't have to run that election. Or if you have, well, the elementary and the high school position should never be on the same ballot because it's two separate
Okay,
sets of
okay,
electors.
right, okay.
So yeah, in that case, it's going to be 2 separate people getting that ballot. If you have a 3-year elementary position with 1 candidate, a 1-year elementary position with 1 candidate, and you're running an elementary levy, can you cancel your election by acclamation? And the answer is yes, but you want to make sure that when you send out your notice that you're canceling the election by acclamation, that you say, we are canceling the trustee portion of our election by acclamation, but we are still running an elementary levy. That way they know that a portion of the election has been canceled, but you're really going to hold the election still to consider that elementary levy. You don't want to give anybody the impression that your election is canceled when you're still running an election in the same area, if that makes sense. And then the last example there, you have 1 3-year elementary position. This is for trustee nominating districts. You have one candidate for that position, and you have a 3-year position in nominating district number 2, and you have 2 candidates. Can you cancel the District 1 election? And the answer is yes, because again, they're separate elections because they're 2 completely separate sets of electors. There's no overlap in the electors in that case. So you can cancel District 1 and still run District 2. Again, that notice is published not less than 30 days before the election. Both have to, do you have to count both? I'll go back here. Rebecca's question, Shelley. I didn't catch all of it, sorry.
No worries. In your very first example, where both have to be on the ballot, do you have to count both? So,
Technically you should, yes. Yes,
and that,
tech-
yeah, because then you're gonna canvass.
yep. So you have to publish that notice not less than 30 days before the election. Some jurisdictions only have weekly newspapers. So getting that notice on that 30th day, because that also coincides with ballot certification and all your deadlines. If you can't get the notice in the paper on that 30th day, put your notice in the public places and on your district website so that you have a notice out there in time, and then get your paper notice done as soon as you can. Again, if there's no contingency for the election administrator to cancel the election, that school board has to meet on the specific day to take action. And again, if you're canceling the trustee election but holding another type of election, mention that very specifically in your notice. Be very transparent and clear about what you're doing and what you're canceling and what you're not. All right, now we'll talk about election judges, and I'll get back to that question about election administrators and election judges.
Nicole, can I ask a quick question? This is Rebecca.
Of course you can.
Sorry, I've decided typing takes too long. I am wondering on the election by acclamation cancellation notice, does it actually have to go in the newspaper, or can we just post on our website and post on our doors?
It does have to go in. It does have to go in the newspaper. It says that specifically. Andrea, can you pull up that that one for me? Let's see.
Which one is it?
Let's see here. I'll see if I can grab it here really quick, Montana. I should have put it in here and I apologize. I'll see if I can grab that when I do
Okay, it
that.
doesn't say that in the election calendar either, and so I never have done that. Put in the paper, but I'm certainly going to if I'm supposed to.
Yep. And it's under 20-3. 3. I've got it right here, so I will pull this up. Let's go here, share screen. So it says right here, if the number of candidates filing is equal to, the trustees may cancel the election. If the election is canceled, the trustees shall give notice. And then it says it says that they shall give notice, and then in 2020, one of these is election notice. And I always grab the wrong one here. There it is, 2020-204. This is how they have to give notice. And so when it just says in general, they have to give notice, this is the notice that's required. Publishing in a newspaper if there is one, in 3 places, and on the district website 10 days prior. So. So no, it's not specific in that 20-3. But when it's general like that, we have to follow the specific notice requirements in 2022-04. So yes, you should be publishing it in the newspaper if you can.
So like in the Flathead, Big Fork, Whitefish, Columbia Falls, and Kalispell are the only ones that have a newspaper in their district.
Mhm. Yep, so
So-
if they don't, they would just publish it in a public location.
Okay. But like if it were a high school, outlying high school rep from one of those smaller districts, they would have to put it in the paper because that's in the high school district, right?
Correct, they should put that in the
Okay.
paper. Yep. You know, and if you've got an area where you've got a lot of school districts like that, they could pool, let's see if I can talk today. They should pool their resources and say, you know, the following districts have canceled their election by acclamation. And then you have one notice that they can share the expense rather than, you know, 10 notices that they have to do. So that's an option as well. All right. All right, so let's go back to election judges here. I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and stop right here because we're at 12:08. And I hate to cut your lunch short by 8 minutes, but if we could come back at 1 or even 1:05, let's take a break. Let everybody get some lunch and stretch, and we'll come back and start from here if that's okay with everybody. All right, sounds good.
Thank you.